Focusing on the smaller details this time with infantry units and vehicles. I talked to you a while ago about infantry being mounted on smaller bases, and now we'll go into why that is. Before we go in, just know that this video was originally just going to be that opening and 5 minutes of static. Units of infantry are known as squads. A single based piece should only have about 6 to 10 units on it, which represents that squad. These units should be the same scale as your other units, so like 144-ish. Where can you get these units? I recommend trying a model vendor that does old wartime models. They usually have some tanks and troops in 1/144 scale. It says here the bases you use shouldn't be bigger than the ones used for mobile suits, so you can just keep it smaller than like a regular action base. I use poker chips for the most part, but whatever does it for you. So these squads are actually organized into larger formations known as platoons. A platoon is normally made up of at most 6 squads of any given type, but you need at least one of them to be a commander squad. You're supposed to mark the bases of each squad so you know which platoon they belong to, but I just use different colored chips, it makes it much easier. The sight radius of any infantry unit is a full 360 degrees since it's multiple people scanning the area. There are 3 different types of squadrons for you to deploy. The first is command squads. These are your on-the-radio officers directing other squads how to attack. They come with the ability Platoon Leader, which allows them to issue orders to other infantry and vehicles in their platoon, much like robots do for other robots. It doesn't say anything about them generating command points or anything of the like, so I'll just leave that up to you. They can, however, use the Ambush and Dig In abilities. Ambush is ambush, but Dig In is an ability that has your units hold position in one spot, and any successful attacks made against them need to be re-rolled once each. While you're dug in, you can't take any actions except deactivating that ability. Next is rifle squads. These are your foot troops. They can't do anything against robots, but they're great for other infantry. Rifles have the following stats and a new SA or small arms tag. This means they can't harm units unless they have an armor value of 0 or are other infantry units. Rifle squads have the Dig In ability, in addition to an ability on some mobile suits known as Massed Fire. This means that if another unit with the same name is within a certain range, it gains an additional attack die when shooting. Last is heavy weapon squads. These are units designed to actually deal some damage to larger units. They have Ambush and Dig In, just like command units. You may notice that I didn't give you any stats for these units. That's because the book doesn't give you stats on this. Those are all in a pinned Discord message currently, so behold the viewing globe. Yeah, infantry's not great. They're kinda slow, they don't go very far, and mostly don't have very good ways to interact with larger units or almost anything else for that matter. Also, the cost you see here are per squad, so a platoon of 6 of them would cost a total of any combination of 6 of these numbers. Even at the lowest cost for a platoon, I could get like 2 Impulse Gundams. I said this before, but these are sections of the rulebook that are not great. I should take a moment to say that the book says nothing about squads being destroyed or dead after a hit because your platoon actually shares a health pool. I guess they all just poof once the platoon runs out of integrity. I'll leave the links for these stats in the description of this video. They say Earth Federation and Xeon, but you can use them for any factions that you want. So morale is also applied to your infantry. Squads don't check morale separately, however. The entire platoon checks morale together and uses their combined integrity for the roll. The integrity for the platoon is based on how many squads are in it. A platoon of 4 squadrons would have 4 integrity. Once again, morale checks affect the platoon as a whole. So once one squad fails a morale check, the whole platoon goes down a level. Before I go into the specialization of infantry, I need to talk about vehicles. I don't have a good scale vehicle, so I'm just gonna use the Skygrasper again. Just pretend it's on the ground. Oh, never mind. I talked a bit about these during the mobile armor video, but this should help you decide what you want to do with them. The book defines vehicles as any moving machine that moves on or just above the surface. This excludes things that move in the air or in space. I think I said this in the mobile armor video, but they can't have limbs or a torso, so it's just, weird shaped stuff. Regular vehicles can't have an integrity higher than 5. But of course, this doesn't count for really large vehicles like land ships and other behemoths. So it says in the book this was going to be covered in the future, so I guess we'll just make that up at some point. This rulebook was written in 2017. Movement for vehicles is about the same as other ground units I covered in the movement video, with the exception that turning less than 90 degrees costs you 3 inches of movement, and more than 90 degrees costs you 6 inches of movement. So your vehicle needs to be one of 4 types: tracked, wheeled, floating, or hover. Tracked vehicles are using treads like a tank and follow normal movement rules. Wheeled vehicles count difficult terrain as dangerous, and dangerous terrain simply can't be moved through. Floating vehicles can only move across water and treat it as normal terrain. Hover vehicles can move across normal and water terrain, but treat difficult terrain as dangerous and can't cross dangerous terrain. Instead of boosting, vehicles have what's called flank speed. In the same way a boost was a slow action, flank speed allows you to take a slow action to move double your current movement. The difference is that flank speed ignores any terrain or effects that would half your movement speed. You can't blitz over terrain that you normally can't cross like you would with a boost action, but if you find yourself in like a sand trap or something, you can flank speed out of it. I'm glad I used the Sky Grasper for this because I need to talk about turrets. Most vehicles, like tanks, have a rotating gun on top with the turreted ability, and use this ability to determine their sight arc. Players can rotate a turret during their turn for no cost whatsoever, but once you move it, you can't do it again until your next turn. That weapon's sight arc is exclusively determined by the direction of the turret. You can just use the center of the gun to determine the center of the sight. Movement still applies as normal, I suppose, so just use a marker to remind yourself which direction the gun is. So vehicles are just represented as single units on the battlefield. Try to keep them around 144, but if you need to go a bit smaller or larger, that's fine. If you want to use a base, try to keep it within like 20 millimeters. If you want to group vehicles into squadrons, you can do so with vehicles that share a unit type and have 3 integrity or less. You can have a maximum of 12 in a squadron, and one of them has to be the commander. So unlike platoon commanders, squadron commanders actually get the commander tag and gain squadron commander ability, which lets them issue orders to other units in their squadron. If a vehicle is on its own, it makes morale checks individually, but squadrons follow the same rules as platoons. When you make these checks for squadrons, you use the number of vehicles in that squadron as integrity. So the book says that 6 vehicles counts as 12 integrity, but that doesn't make any sense. It would be 6 vehicles counts as 6 integrity. Now that we've covered vehicles, let's talk about mixing and matching platoons and squadrons. This is sort of the same as a bunch of infantry just riding in a carrier or a tank. To do this, you just need to designate a unit as the squadron commander or platoon leader. It says here in the book, the platoon checks morale by counting all of the unit's integrity, but I'm sure they once again meant the total number of units. Or, if you want, you can roll morale with like 25 integrity. You do you. Lastly, there are special types of infantry that use jetpacks to go into battle. These are called commandos. You can turn any infantry into a commando unit by doubling their point cost. Once you do, you get the following abilities. Fearless. You don't need to make morale checks with these units. Knife fighters. When you fight other infantry in close combat, you gain an extra attack die. Demolition charges. You gain the ability to fight units with armor values of 1 or more. When you do, you get to use these bad boys. These are demo charges, like the ones used in the original Gundam series and Build Fighters. In the same vein as a Vulcan doing some damage, these can be rather handy as they don't have a weapon type, so they can't be reduced by things like neo-laminate or phase shift armor. I should add that you can only melee fight large units. Gotta get close to plant those charges. Jetpacks. These units can boost 8 inches. The only drawback is that heavy weapon units that become commandos can't do this. Why? I don't know, shut up. Before we go, I want to share some groundbreaking tech that's supposed to be in the ever-in-progress version 2.5. I think it's actually supposed to be version 2.1, since we're actually only on version 2.01. In this new version, you would be able to occupy buildings with infantry that is within 1 inch of it. This of course assumes that the building would have space for infantry to occupy. While inside of the terrain, they would not take any damage that was not a spread shot like an explosive or a spray tag weapon. Only one squad can occupy a building at a time, and if it gets destroyed, they take damage from terrain terrain destruction, which we'll talk about later. But as long as they're in there, they can fire at units and measure line of sight from whichever floor of the building you want them to be in. That's it for infantry. This is the part of the game I would like to revamp most of all, but I'll leave it here for now. Next time, environment and terrain in a bit more detail. See you then.